Yo, Pat here. We just saw Godzilla at the midnight. It wasn't really midnight.
It was 10:20.
It was before midnight, so we saw it a day early.
Ooh.
Not really.
Oh, technically it is on the 16th and it ended on the 16th, so...
Yeah,
Ooh.
whatever. Yeah, so... Yeah, Godzilla.
Godzilla.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll go first since you have some stuff you want to talk about.
I have some complaints about this. Like, you know, not to, like, be that guy or whatever, but I grew up watching, like, all the Godzilla movies, all the old ones, all the old crappy ones that, there was no such thing as special effects. Special effects was like a costume. And, all those videos, I'm not going to praise them for being like the best Godzilla movies ever. I still don't think there has been a Godzilla movie that's lived up to being a perfect, that's been like, the movie. Because for a lot of the American audience doesn't want to sit around and watch like a Japanese Godzilla movie because it's just, going back to like Godzilla versus Biollante, there was like, secret ninja assassins and stuff trying to steal this and do that, and the story has never... People watch to see monsters fight. There's never been a Godzilla movie with like that story. The closest it's ever come was the 1998-99 Matthew Broderick, what's his name? Harry Shearer? I think.
That guy.
And Hank Azaria. Basically a couple of guys from The Simpsons. That was one of my favorite movies of all time. Growing up as a kid, that's how I got into Godzilla. I've watched that movie over 10 billion trillion times in my lifetime. More than my, I don't know what I'm saying. I watched a lot. This movie, the complaints I have, I'll say this because I don't want to spoil anything, but I will give you a couple of hints here. If you go into this to see Bryan Cranston and you expect him to if your expectations are high for Bryan Cranston, not his acting, just if your expectations are high, lower them. His acting is great, but just lower them. If you see this movie or if you have seen it, you'll know what I mean. It's just, that bothered me. I don't want to spoil anything, but it bothered the hell out of me. It seemed, story-wise, that everything was one big coincidence. Everything seemed to happen at the right time, and I love Ken Watanabe. I don't know who the main dude was. I enjoyed Bryan Cranston. What was it, Aaron? Something. I just heard it earlier, but
Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Yeah. Everything in this movie, story-wise, seemed to be like a big coincidence. A consistent, painful coincidence to experience, and everything was like spelled out for you, I felt. So many things were like, turn around, and it's like, his name is Godzilla, and like, we're gonna wait for them, like, the Ken Watanabe at one point was like, wait for the monsters to fight it out. He doesn't talk like that. That's me being like completely racist. He's like, wait for the monsters to fight it out or whatever. I'm like, how do you know? How do you know? And I'm like, it's just like everything is like just one big smooth coincidence. I'm like, there's no like conflict in this movie. It's basically everything's working out for people, and it's so painful to watch. I wanted the part to be like, oh, like, how do they get out of this? Or I'm like, that threw a wrench in all my plans. The only thing that threw a wrench in what I thought was going on, just a little bit, was at the tour, not the beginning, but some ways into the movie when the villainous monsters, the first one I guess comes out. I kind of was expecting to be Godzilla, but another monster appeared. That's the biggest wrench that was thrown into this movie for me. I'm watching the entire time like everything, there's no conflict here. It's monsters, and then everyone's scrambling around. Oh, how do we kill these monsters? It's like I expected, like the new Godzilla. I expected to be like this, 2014 masterpiece. I'm there thinking like everything. You don't need to spell that out for me. You don't need to. You don't have to like the dial. I expect things to in movies to happen, just be a coincidence. Everything to be perfectly timed for this guy to live or for that guy to live. But it was done so badly, in my opinion, that I'm just like I can't enjoy this. It didn't let me figure anything out for myself. And eventually everything was like, just spelled out for me. Like, I want to figure things out for myself. I want this guy to be put in a real bind here, not just coincidence. You get out of this, get out of that. That's my big, thing with this movie. It was just too. They didn't let you figure anything out on your own. The monsters, Godzilla, he looked cool. I mean, with 2014 animation and the graphics and the look of everything, the computer animation, everything. Yeah, he looked fine. I have no complaints about that. He's just on par with everything. It's not like some parts I'm blown away. Some parts, like angles, I guess you could say, on certain things with Godzilla, I'm like, that looks pretty cool. Like the angles that they used and the kind of animation that they did. But it just looked kind of on par as I expected, except until the very end. I'll spoil this for you. Godzilla's going back into the ocean. You can expect him not to die. He goes back into the ocean, and you see his big things on the back, like submerging in the water. I'm like, that looks totally crappy. It's like they shoe shine this whole movie, and this the end. They forgot about it. It looks so fake. Just pay attention to that part where the water's coming around. I'm like, that looks so crappy. The villain monster. I felt the monsters got a fair amount of credit in this movie, but not as much as people would come to see. It's especially in the United States of America. People are generally, they would go to this movie to see big monster brawls the entire movie. That's really wasn't how it is. Everything with the monsters in general, Godzilla and the Muto.
The Mutos.
Yeah, they basically look like Megaguirus and Orga combined, kind of like Cloverfield dude. It basically, everything shot from the monster's angle seemed to be so slow. Like every time they did anything, it was in slow motion. And I'm like, they could move a little faster than that. Everything was in slow motion when they moved. It's just, everything seemed to be so, like, I just felt like I'm too smart for all this. I don't think I'm that smart at all. I don't think I'm, better than anyone. But I'm like, I'm too smart for this movie. This movie is just dumbed down and everything is, monsters move too slow. And it's like, oh, slow motion, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, come on. And everything was just,
I will say on behalf of the monsters moving slow.
They're fucking huge.
They're 300 foot. They're not
Still,
going to move super
it would
fast.
be cool. It's just everything was like, they could move a little. Everything was just in such slow motion. It could have been just a little quicker and a little more like, oh, that's a battle, not just slow motion like, just people like going like that, like just LARPing. I mean, it could have been like this awesome, vicious battle. I didn't. But it was not. Nonetheless, I have a lot of complaints about this. Up until this point, no Godzilla movie has ever been perfect. And I would say that 1999 Godzilla is better than this one. Not graphic-wise, but just kind of general story-wise to me, with like Reno, Azaria, Broderick, all the guys in there. Shearer, all the people. I don't remember Audrey's name. But it's just, the story in this was like, it just kind of trailed off after this big event. You'll know what I'm talking about if you watch it. Happens. It just kind of trails off to me, and I'm like, yeah. The acting wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad though. And it overall was a pretty decent movie. But more disappointed than I was pleased with some things.
I have a lot fewer complaints about the movie. I actually think this was better than the 1999, 98, whatever Godzilla. So, fuck you, Sam.
Take away the graphics and everything.
Even taking away the graphics, I
still felt it
think the
slowly.
story was better. Mainly just because the guys in the cast, you can have all these superstars in it, but it just felt like there was no chemistry between
You
the
didn't
main
feel like the
characters
whole
in that
story
movie.
didn't just insist upon itself and
No,
constantly have to explain itself here and there?
because it didn't explain
It
itself.
did. Everything was one big coincidence. Everything was like...
Because it's
They
a
spell it out.
fucking movie!
No, everything is like spelled out for you. It's not like I need to figure this out or anything. It's a bad movie in that sense. And anyone that would be very critical of it and, you know, that's just what I thought.
I'm not saying this is the greatest movie ever, but I have a lot fewer complaints. The CG was great. There were a lot of, I want to say camera shots, but I know they weren't camera shots because it's, you know, Godzilla. He's not actually there. They're not going to build a 300.
How do you know? How do you know?
They're not going to build a giant 350, you know, foot or story monster.
Yeah.
But the reveals of Godzilla were well executed in the angles. I guess they decided to animate from. I can't really say shot the camera from. Like the scene with the flares, that reveal, and then the first time you get that full pan up, and the first Godzilla scream roar thing, that was well executed. The animations were great. The Mutos, I'm going to say almost Mothra, because it wasn't exactly Mothra. That revelation kind of threw me off, because I was like, that's not Godzilla. And I was expecting Godzilla to be revealed fairly early on, and it wasn't until I'd say about halfway through, that Godzilla actually made its appearance.
Something like that.
The acting on the part of at least the two, I guess, main protagonists, played by, I forgot his name already. Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen. Their scenes were pretty good. Ken Watanabe, of course, is a phenomenal actor. Again, Bryan Cranston really wasn't in it much, but he did a phenomenal job while he was on screen. And what was his name? Basically the guy that was in charge of the ship.
The general?
The general.
Admiral.
David Strathairn. He was in a couple other like sci-fi series I watched that have since been canceled. He was meh. I will say that. But in terms of the pacing of the movie, I think it was very good. It didn't really spend too long on the origins of Godzilla or the Mutos, the almost Mothras, because one had wings and the other didn't. So I think that was well done. The explanation of, you know, why in the 50s everyone was doing all these nuclear tests in the middle of nowhere in the ocean, which they said was to basically try to kill Godzilla. And of course we got the Gojira pronunciation, and made everybody kind of happy. I wouldn't say this is probably the best movie of the summer. I wouldn't even say this is the definitive Godzilla movie. But I would definitely buy this when it comes out. It was just a very good movie. The special effects were great, as is fitting of a movie coming out in the year 2014, if you follow the Judeo-Christian calendar.
You want to go? Or...
We're doing it a line.
Alright, fine. I figured I'd mix it up. Alright, I'd say I did like this movie a lot. I will agree with Sam on a couple things that the story did lack a little bit. It's one of the very few times that I'll agree with IGN where the human story. I'll give it the props that it was attempting to be there, but it just kind of wasn't there. In a way, and it was weird because maybe the one major problem that I have maybe with this movie would be that's because they tried to have it there so much, it took away from maybe the time for,
monsters
maybe
fighting.
a longer monsters fighting, which is the real reason.
I will give it that. The human story did kind of lack, but the overall story arc was pretty good.
Yeah, but then with that, the whole coincidence thing, I do get like the thing on the subway train car. I kind of get that it maybe that, and then I don't know, like he shows up to like a place and they happen to be going to like, oh, we're going to where you want to go or something like that, or I don't know, just maybe some things like that I can see, but
Like
it's
they
like
go to Hawaii and then the monster comes to Hawaii and they go to this place and then it's just like everything seems to like the story didn't like cover it up as nicely as I wanted it to.
yeah,
That's what
I'm
going at.
like that. I can see those problems, but I mean they're gonna be there. It's a movie. They kind of have to. I will admit, even though it was kind of campy, I did like we call him Gojira. I like that moment just because it's like they put that in solely for
Fans of these movies.
fans to geek out, and again I can also maybe kind of see what you're saying about how everything's kind of spelled out. I mean, most movies do in some way, shape, or form kind of spell it out, but I mean, a lot of it was spelled out, but then some things were made big and not. Like, the whole reason of why the two Mutos were trying to meet up and what actually, the final, like, nuke was for. Like, that kind of wasn't a big deal.
That's where I was kind of thinking, like, you could kind of understand, like, if they just showed why they were meeting up or something, you could kind of, like, but they explained it to you, and, like, I agree with Keith, and Luke how they said, like, every movie's going to be like that. It's just how good you cover it up and how lost that you get in the story that they aren't noticed as much.
So, and then the big things, which, is the money grabber, which is, Godzilla and the two Mutos. I thought they were done very, very well. One thing that, real quick before I get back on that, is I think that this movie definitely does better than most Godzillas. Maybe not the original, because the original does this really, really well, but the scale of this movie, and just, you're just kind of, where you're watching a scene and it's taking place out in the ocean, and then all of a sudden you see planes dropping out of the sky. Like, and that kind of scale. You look out and literally there's only like a handful of buildings still standing in a city. Like, the scale is so much bigger than most other Godzilla movies.
This is the biggest Godzilla we've seen to date.
Yes, he's actually twice the size of the largest, I think almost twice the size of the previous largest incarnation. But, everybody was calling him fat, which, I mean, he's kind of big, but I can kind of forgive that again. He's kind of has to be, he's so tall, he kind of has to be kind of fat. And it's one of the things that I know it's traditional, and I had grown to love about the Japanese movies, which is, up until this point, except for the 1998 movie, Godzilla was always portrayed as a guy in a suit. So he would do, like, really cheesy, campy wrestling moves and stuff like that. He would, like, pick things up and throw them. And I like that it's not there. It's a lot more of almost like two animals fighting, in a way, when him and the Mutos were fighting. And I did like how the one flew, and they were two different creatures, even though they were the same. And it was really cool. So, and then the acting was pretty good. I'm not going to say it's phenomenal. I feel like, again, Bryan Cranston did an amazing job for what he was part of the plot for. But it's like everyone else they were great. It's just that it didn't work 100% in my eyes. But then other than that, I mean, like I said, I went, go to the movie to see big giant things blow each other up, and
and destroy cities.
And my taste was fulfilled of that. So I give it a thumbs up.
I'm going to start by saying I've never seen a Godzilla movie in my life. So, I mean, I know about Godzilla and, you know, its villains. I just was never really interested in watching any of the movies. So, this was my first. And I have to say, it was good, but it wasn't, it honestly wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. I felt like my biggest complaint about this movie is the human story, or the, you know, more human side of things. I felt like it was just there to kind of pad the movie's length out, because, yeah, I mean, you're going to pay to watch this movie to see some pretty epic and well done, you know, scenes between Godzilla fighting, you know, some crazy fucking Muto-like things. But, I mean, I'm not going to spoil it, but I just felt the ending of the human story was just so unsatisfying.
Yeah.
It just ended. It ended without any expression, and it just, I was like, okay. Like, I didn't feel anything with that. I'm like, okay, fuck that. So I really just didn't dig that too much. And I do agree with Sam. The more I think about it, the more blatantly obvious certain things were. You know, such as all of a sudden, you know, he has a train ride back to San Francisco. And, you know, like Sam said, you know, they're going to Hawaii. The monster shows up in Hawaii and stuff like that. And just certain scenes, you know, sometimes you watch movies and what happens you just didn't expect, and you kind of knew what was going to happen. Most of the time in this movie, I felt you knew that, you know, shit was going to go down. You knew somehow this guy was going to live. You know, it was just so blatantly obvious. And I do agree with Sam a little bit, and, you know, this movie just doesn't cover stuff like that up very well. But I mean, it was a good movie. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it all. It was fun to watch, and I think the Godzilla was done superb. I just thought the whole, like, getting back to what Keith said about the scale, but just the scenes, the shots, everything was just fantastic. I thought the fight scenes were just awesome. I mean, I kind of agree with just about everything these guys said. So, I mean, the human acting, Bryan Cranston definitely did the best job in this entire movie compared to the other people. I mean, they were good, but they just didn't go, like, it just wasn't a moment to me. But yeah, I mean, and then there was only one moment in the whole story that just kind of threw a wrench into things, and I just didn't expect. But I thought the whole story arc as a whole was good. It just didn't really dig the I guess, subplots that was going on with the human stuff between, what was his name? Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Ford
Ford Brody is a fucking stupid name.
That is
his
really
wife.
I'm just throwing that
However,
out
his
there.
wife is hot and he didn't get to slam it at all.
Well, I mean, he has a kid, so I mean, he did it somewhere.
Well, I mean, in the movie, like, he was about to slam it, and then his dad, Bryan Cranston, went and got arrested in Japan.
So,
yeah.
And that's how we have a plot.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, some of the shots were just so cool. Like, right in the beginning, when the helicopter's flying down in, and, you know, they're excavating for something and they found something. And just the shot looking down, you just see all these people working, and then they go inside this tunnel. I just thought it looked so cool. So, I mean, a lot of things were well done. It's just a couple of small things just didn't work for me. But it was a good movie, and I definitely recommend you go see it.
Anyways, maybe you'll love the acting. maybe you think we're stupid. I don't
The
know.
fight scene was great, though.
Yeah.
I think we can all kind of agree on that.
Yeah.
Like when you
The
knew
big fight.
shit was going down, it really
It-
went down.
like,
and
shit
it was
got
so
wrecked.
cool.
San Francisco got wrecked like a cheap whore.
Yeah.
Did anyone else think that Godzilla's nuclear breath was unsatisfying? It should have been a lot like.
I
Yeah,
liked the build up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that build-up was just fucking awesome.
But then I see what you mean. But then again, maybe it was because to make it a little bit more almost believable, because in the old school version, it's like
It's a
actually
beam.
is, the beam is like wider than his actual mouth half the time.
Yeah.
It's like how the hell does he do that?
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, it's a little bit more cool. And then it's just a beam. We don't know if it's like the radioactive like in the other one. Or...
yeah.
In just a sense of scale, when the one Muto that was flying, when they would kind of, he would fly towards the camera but fly in from really far away, and you just saw how wide he was with his wings spread.
Which
He just
It's
flies
even
by.
better
It
when you
was
see
so
when you
cool.
see the two of them next to each other,
Yeah.
and you realize that the other
the
one's
one is fucking
huge.
Yeah.
Like I'm like the one is almost like Reaper huge from Mass Effect.
Yeah, and the scene where the first one just appears and awakens, that was just...
Yeah.
I like that, like how it was like the mystery of kind of what those things were, how that came from. It was kind of cool.
How they
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, it wrapped me up in the story a bit towards the beginning, but once they were kind of there, like I felt that they brought in the Mito is pretty
Yeah.
cool. Like,
I do want to know, because it's a little subtle thing they put in there. I like how subtly, and it's mostly during just like the very first couple minutes of the movie in the opening credits, I like how they kind of almost tied it in to say that like the 1994 movie happened in a way. Like that's what a lot of people said. Like Godzilla was around, and then they were like they're blaming it on all what happened to Tokyo on natural disasters, and so then now they're trying to blow them up. Like, and so it's like, oh, okay. And so like, I kind of liked that they're. It's like, oh, this did happen, but now this is a different thing. So I thought that was really cool.
Really quick before we give scores, what was your favorite scene?
There were a lot of really like just cool, really well done scenes.
I want to say the one on the bridge when Godzilla first shows up to San Francisco, and he's kind of like he popped, and then he's alongside the bridge, and they're shooting at the bridge. I thought that was really cool.
Go ahead, Sam.
even though I felt it was like I said, kind of slow-mo and drawn out a little bit, I like when the first Muto like hatched from its thing, how like it kind of like escaped this big detainment center sort of thing. I thought that was pretty, how it was like ripping down everything. I thought even though I like aside of the fight scene is cool, but I have to give like another scene, I would say that one was pretty cool.
Yeah, aside from the fight scene, which I believe we can all agree was pretty damn epic.
Yeah.
The Halo jump, when they're jumping into the center of San Francisco,
That
it just
was fun.
it really gave me an appreciation of the scale of not just the monsters themselves, but the fucking destruction.
Yeah,
that
it
was
was
going
so
on.
cool how they would just pull the camera back and you just see them.
You just see these red streaks from their flares
in the
or
sky.
smoke.
It's just
It just
smoke.
shows you how
It was so
insignificant
cool.
they were.
Yeah.
Actually, another and a part two one is towards the end of the movie, after the Ford, he blows something up, and one of the Mutos sees it, and then it sees him. And it gets like right in his face. I thought that was pretty cool.
That was cool. How did he blow that up? Like he I thought it was like
ga-
water.
it was gasoline.
Well, how did he like blow it up?
The fire.
There was a subtle flame on the right hand side of the screen.
There was
I
a
was
lot-
thinking like
so
I thought that was
subtle.
like sewer water. I'm like, is he gonna drown them? I don't know.
All that destruction, there was a lot of shit on fire.
Oh yeah.
And one last thing I want to note is the soundtrack was amazing.
Yes.
No, it
to
sounds.
this movie.
I love how the soundtrack completely
really well
changed when when they made Godzilla into a hero, it's like boom, epic music instead of like scary music.
Yeah.
Last thing, well, really quick, the sounds of the monsters was awesome.
Yeah.
I think this is the best sounding Godzilla because just like I don't know, it has the same sound, but it sounds more real.
It
That
just
makes
sounds bigger.
Yeah, much beef.
Scores.
Me personally, I would give it. Well, first of all, I would say go see it yourself, but keep your mind open. Don't expect too much. I feel like that may have been what held it back a little bit to me, but kind of keep an open mind, and I would say like 6.5, maybe 7.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Sam and these guys. Like, the human acting was good for the most part, but the human story subplot just kind of was meh. But again, I went to see this movie to see big-ass monsters fight and destroy shit. So I'd definitely give it a 7 out of 10.
Maybe I'm just optimistic because I literally went in and kind of got what I paid for. So I mean, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like because I put the actual human acting so down low, I really enjoyed much of it, and even the acting when it did, it was okay. So I mean, heck, I'd give it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I'd give it an 8 out of 10 as well. It was good. Just not the movie that makes me go.
Yeah, like someone already said, it's not a definitive Godzilla movie by far.
Yeah.
We're still waiting for that.
It'll happen.
I expect to see much shit get blown up.
Bye.